10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anna Morgan, your career BFF. It has been a hot minute since I have gone live on my own page. So I couldn't be here for a better reason than to serve job seekers and career changers. And I am so excited to welcome my guest, Terry Bean, who is a professional who is absolutely dedicated to maximizing human potential in all areas of life. And I am going to bring him up. Terry, welcome. So glad you're here. And this is Ask a Networker.
Ask a Networker. Yeah, we kind of like co-opted the show name a little bit, didn't we?
It's a popular thing. It's no longer AMA. It's Ask a Recruiter, Ask a Podcaster, Ask a Networker. So I kind of feel like maybe I'm a trendsetter. Who knows?
You probably are in ways you have no idea yet. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. G, thanks for being here. We've got some awesome folks in the chat here. Timothy, we've got Chasen Forehand here. Thank you for supporting and being here. Awesome, awesome. So, the power of LinkedIn. And I love this community. I love LinkedIn. And it was because of G that I was introduced to you. And, you know, that is the epitome of networking. So I'm excited to learn more about your networking journey and about you. So I want to start off with Try Bean. What is that all about, and how has that played a role in your journey over the last 10, 13 years?
You know, it actually started as my Hotmail email address back in 1996. I couldn't get Terry Bean at Hotmail, and so they suggested Terry Bean 8743 or whatever they suggested. I'm like, that's no good. Let me just drop the E and the R out of my first name. Try Bean. I'm like, that's funny and really good advice. So
I love it.
When I started my second business back in 2001 timeline, it was named Networked Inc., right? Because I was about networking and connecting people and doing all that stuff. And I had networkedinc.com. But every time I had to say the email address, tbean@networkedinc.com, it was like 4 times of saying it before spelling it. And I'm like, this is crap. I can't do this anymore. So I changed the business name to Try Bean. And again, still sounds like really good advice. And at one point decided that Bean was an acronym for Be Exceptional at Networking. So it was like, that's kind of cute.
That is perfect. Be exceptional at networking. I love it. So you emphasize the importance of being professional, personal, and, that also involves being financially responsible. So can you delve into more of like and expand on be more in kind of those three domains: personally, professionally, and financially?
Yeah.
Um,
So go ahead.
no, that's it. I'm complete. Thanks.
Okay. I was like, wait, you sound like you're still talking. So for me, like, we're not just like one leg of a stool, you know. So if I look at the lives we live, I usually use 5 pillars of a life well lived, and those are wellness across mental health, physical health, spiritual health, relationship health, and financial health, right?
Beautiful.
And I'm
Mhm,
not I'm not here to coach anybody on their spiritual journey or their spiritual well-being. If you
mhm.
want to have those conversations, great, happy to do that. I do the relationship thing, especially from a business perspective. Uh,
Okay.
I do some financial coaching, but I am not a financial planner, a wealth manager, or anything along those lines. What I
Mhm.
can help you do is grow your business, right? I can help you grow your income. But the thing is, none of these things operate in a vacuum. We're all so interconnected across all of them that
Yeah.
if we're not focused on building ourselves, we're not going to really build our business. And if we don't
Mhm.
build our business, we're certainly not going to build our financial situation. So
Absolutely.
I look at those three things and how do we elevate each one of those?
Amazing. And when you talk about a business, I mean, that's relevant for an entrepreneur like myself, but your business is also your professional career, and building your professional and personal brand, I think, is incorporated into that. So Bob Berg, he says, all things being equal, people do business with those that they know, like, and trust. And, as I was doing my recruiter sleuthing and research on you, it appears that you've adopted this approach to networking and building relationships. And I think that would be immensely helpful and practical for job seekers. And I would love for you to kind of elaborate on your framework and kind of what you've learned over your journey. Because when you started really getting savvy with networking, it has evolved tremendously just in the last 10 years.
Just in the last 3 years, right? It's
Yeah,
changed at almost 180 degrees. It's pretty
exactly.
interesting to be sure. um, so Bob Berg is a great jumping off point. I had the good fortune of being about 25, 26, being involved in a networking group in Columbus, Ohio, where I lived prior to living here. And it was one of those things that group continued to grow. I got in a chapter that had 14 people. At one point, we had like 52, right? So we did explosive growth. I was the membership director of that group, and then ended up moving into an area director role where I oversaw a handful of chapters. And I was 26, maybe 27, running around teaching all these folks how to network more effectively, how to bring members in, how to keep
Right.
them, and all that good stuff. And that was a cool journey. And one of the retreat events that we had for that leadership team was going to see a presenter back in 1998, and that presenter was Bob Berg. And
Okay.
so I got to meet him 25 years ago.
Wow.
Um, and then we've stayed in contact and been friends for a long time now. And
Amazing.
he's just such a great example of how to be a good human being. And
Mhm.
I assume that you brought that up because I posted about him on LinkedIn yesterday,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So
exactly.
you're
And I've actually heard his name come up quite a bit in the last year and a half between fellow entrepreneurs and job seekers. I I'm not totally sure if he's super active on the platform, but I'm definitely intrigued to learn more about him. So, thank you for sharing that. Kind of elaborating on that, I'm also curious about your face, your acronym your success strategy. So focus, right? Awareness, communications, and execution. So how did you come up with this framework? Because I love frameworks as a ping pong rabbit brain thinker that is used for wonderful creative things, but knowing where you're starting and where you're ending and having some pillars to guide you through whether it's networking activities or job search strategies, I think is incredibly helpful. So would this framework apply for job seekers?
A million trillion percent. And
Okay.
let me give you the genesis of this one because it's kind of a sad story with a happy ending. It was
Okay, I'll get ready.
2016. It was 2016. I started my first company in 1998. Did that for a couple of years. Moved back to Detroit area in 2000. Found a job. Had 3 jobs in 2 years because I'm not a real good employee. Um,
Me neither.
I'm, I'm psychologically unemployable, if I'm being totally honest. That being said, yeah, it's a good time. When I was probably 7 years into this incarnation of the business in 2016, and it was not going well. In fact, it sucked. And at one point, I remember being catatonic on the floor contemplating suicide. It was
Oh
really,
no.
really shitty. And my own doing or lack of doing, probably
Hmm.
more specifically. And
Right.
so I really sat down and said, what am I lacking? What am I missing? What do I need more of? And in the timeline, um,
Need to do that. Sorry.
no, that's all right. You're easier to look at than I am.
Well, my live streaming skills are a little rusty. I apologize.
That's all right. You're like, hey, frame it up on me. He's
I,
talking.
I
That'll work
wanted
out
to
well.
frame it on you. That was my intention.
You were close.
User error.
You were super close. And so as I sat and I contemplated what was it, I was like, well, the 4 things that I need to do better. I need more focus. I need to stay laser focused on a single thing. I
Mm-hmm.
need more awareness of who I am and what I do, right? Externally,
Mm-hmm.
but internally, I need to be more aware of what I'm trying to do and what my intentions are and
Mm-hmm.
all the things that make a better life. Sleep patterns,
Right.
exercise. It's that awareness piece is where the 5 pillars that we talked about earlier came from.
Okay.
And then communications was, how am I getting the message out? Who am I talking to? How am I
Mm-hmm.
showing up? And then
Mm-hmm.
the last one was execution. And without that, it doesn't matter how great the idea
Yeah.
is. And
Right.
so to tie this into job seekers,
Mm-hmm.
listen, you need to get laser focused on what kind of position you want. The
Mm-hmm.
thing that drives me most nuts about job seekers is when somebody says, what kind of work are you looking for? They say, I'm looking for a job. No shit. We know that. Get specific. You have to tell us what kind of position you want and where you want it to be geographically. And, the more information, what kind of boss, what kind of company, what kind of industry, what kind of role, right? What are the
Yeah.
people like in the
What's your
environment?
zone of genius? What do you do well naturally? What I encourage my clients to focus, like think about what they're listening to, what they're reading, what they're naturally curious about, and then look at that industry or that product, and then reverse engineer. How could I start some conversations with people that are doing super cool things in this industry that I could learn more about and understand if my skills are transferable. And I so deeply resonate, with all of this, one as an entrepreneur and two for job seekers, you know, doing that career inventory and that self-reflection. That's what really is the foundation for the focus, right? And then the awareness, it's like the radical honesty with self. What I think of that guy from The Notebook when he's like, "What do you want?" Like sometimes you like I feel like that with your clients, and even with myself when I'm looking myself in the mirror, and it's like, what do I want to be when I grow up? But um, keeping that top of mind and understanding that it can be fluid, right? As we go through this journey of job searching, career pivoting, entrepreneurial life, you know, we tend to see patterns and connect dots and start to see that this is something that we really love. And, the power of networking, it takes one person to open that door, to that dream opportunity. And then communicating, right? That's your brand, that's positioning, that's being confident in your interviews and telling your story effectively so you get the head nods and the smiles and the next interviews and the offers. And then execution, right? There has to also be, for job seekers, like balance of those activities in service of execution. I've applied to 147 positions. Okay, well, how many coffee chats or informational interviews have you done? That part of execution, there's not balance, right? It's the equanimity is off. So, being able to make sure that you're building your brand, applying for positions, building relationships with recruiters, working a target list. And I believe my philosophy is, and it's kind of a bold statement, but connection over qualifications. When you're in the job search market, of course, there are positions that you have to have hard requirements for. But if you focus on building relationships and being in a place of curiosity and being other focused, I feel like that is just a miracle gate opener that can create just a ripple effect of opportunities.
It's so important, and I love that connection over qualification line, because the number one thing that I think most job seekers struggle with now is, how do I beat the ATS, right? How do I make sure that my resume has the right keywords so the computer can see it? Who doesn't worry about that is someone that reached out to a person inside of the company that may know them or gets to know them, and who hand delivers the resume to the hiring manager. There's no ATS involved at that point.
And I, as a recruiter for 20 years, that's worked both agency, executive, outplacement, and corporate, I can 100% confirm that happens. I can't tell you, in my last position, that was a Fortune 500 big box retailer that had a corporate office of 900 people, how many times over my 5 years working there, a VP, director, the owner of the company would walk by my cube and hand me a resume and say, Terry Bean reached out to me about this role. You should give him a call. And so that absolutely does happen. And I believe in starting conversations with the recruiters, with the person that has the job that you want, the person that hires for the job that you want, maybe even in, collaborating departments to, get that kind of due diligence on how they work together, which will foster more conversation once you get into the interview. I had another really great thought and it just went the other way.
Bots will do that.
Yes, they will. They will. So, over your coaching career, you've developed a bunch of different courses, primarily centered around soft skills. And when I think about soft skills, and you'll have to maybe define this better for me, but I think about, resilience. I think about, let's see, soft skills. Give me some other examples. I'm drawing a blank right.
When I talk about soft skills, I'm talking about mindset, how you show up. I'm talking about communications. I'm talking about interaction and interpersonal skills. Dealing with people.
Emotion, like IQ, EQ.
Yeah, really, not as EQ, more so than IQ. In fact, my favorite one is AQ, your awareness quotient, right? That's where the A in Face of Success actually came from.
Yeah.
It's how do we raise our AQ? And I had done a talk called Raising Your AQ before Face of Success came about.
Oh, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that, because I think that's a great, topic for job seekers to think about. And this is a very delicate and kind of slippery slope conversation that I have sometimes with my clients that, when, someone will reach out and be like, can you help me with my resume or look at my resume? Like, I still can't find a job. And, the question is like, is it you or is it the resume? And there's so many moving parts in that process. But what do you believe is, one of the most under evaluated soft skills that job seekers should be honing or working on as they're going through this process?
The most important one is listening, by far, without a doubt. It's so underrated, it's so underutilized, and it's such a great skill. The one that I argue with myself, which is more important, learning how to ask good questions or actually listening to the answer. So those are one and two for me. And from a job seeker, I know you're thinking, well, what do I have to do any listening for? What do I have to ask questions about? Trust
Right.
me, you do. Because you might actually hear something during a conversation that piques your interest or disturbs your interest. And
Mhm.
how often do we just zip right past the red flag in the name of the almighty green?
Yep.
And like now we're 3 months into it and we're like, Hari Kari, I want to just stab myself repeatedly. I took the wrong gig. Well, if you were paying attention, if you had asked the right questions, if you actually listened to the answers,
Right.
you may not have put yourself in that position to begin with.
Absolutely. In one of my last interviews, this was, pre-COVID, but at the end of the interview, I had met with my peer, the person I'd be reporting to, the CHRO, the VP of Treasury, because I was going to be doing accounting and finance roles. And then I was working with or meeting with the HR, like talent tech team that managed the ATS. Oh, that was the thing I was going to say. Like, the ATS monster does not exist and it tracks your application through from application to screen to review to, interview to rejection or hired. So, if people have questions about that, I'm very much happy to answer it. But when I was at this final step and I had built rapport and I felt good about it, I said, and it just came out of nowhere. And it was one of those questions where it was like, there's a tipping point. This could, you know, go really well, or it could go just completely, I could sink the ship. And I said, what haven't we talked about today that in 90 days or, 6 months from now, I'm going to give you like the stink eye and say, how come you didn't tell me this? And it, elicited smiles and a great dialogue. And it was something like, you know, when you get into a position and you're supposed to do a job like recruiting and you have to have LinkedIn Recruiter, and then you get there and you realize you only have like a super basic recruiter light license and you're like, wow, how did I get myself into this? So asking questions is a critical component of a successful, you know, evaluating a job opportunity and the interview process, because I feel like in this market where candidates are overly stressed going into interviews, they're experiencing financial insecurity, which shows up in a bunch of wonky ways in conversation. They don't feel like they've earned the right to ask these questions. And then, in fact, if you don't have questions at a close of an interview, depending on the interviewer, that could, you know, give you a mark off because they wonder if you're aloof or if they covered everything in the conversation or if you're just not that interested. So I always recommend that candidates have a question about the interviewer, a question about the job description, and a question about, the company or the culture overall, as just like a good basis, and obviously try to keep them open ended. Anything to add to that?
I always ask, from what you've seen of me today, would you be interested in moving forward? Right?
Right. What
I,
are the
I come
next
from a
steps?
salesy background, so you got to close the deal, right?
Yes,
and
and
you
that's
can
another thing.
vary that.
When I work with salespeople, I'm like, oh, the hill is a little less steep sometimes, where it's making sure that you're getting all the information up front. What is the interview process? How many steps? Who's involved? What's the typical timeline? Where are you in the process? Have you been interviewing for 6 weeks or 6 months? That tells a story. And then yeah, not being afraid to ask that question, based on what we've talked about today. Do you feel confident putting me through to the next stage? And is there anything else that I can elaborate on to demonstrate my capabilities for this role? But I think there's a huge opportunity for job seekers to ask more questions specifically about the roles and the day-to-day things that they're going to be doing once they get in the seat.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of asking questions that you probably should have researched, right? Like, if
That's a
the
tricky
answer's on the
one.
website, don't ask that question, right?
Yeah.
Prove that you actually did a little bit of work. Now, you can ask questions related to things you found on the website. That
Hmm.
shows insight, that shows effort, that shows that you actually care,
Right.
right? The challenge
Mhm.
is, hey, how long you been in business? That's on page 2 of the site, homie.
Yeah, yeah,
That,
exactly,
you
exactly.
know,
Like,
so
I remember interviewing a candidate, and she was like, "Yeah, you guys are owned by ABC Company," which is like a direct competitor. And I was like, Not exactly." Like,
not so much.
our
Are you
our
talking about in
founder
the
came
last
from that
deal that we
company, but
lost? You say owned, what does that mean?
yeah.
We got owned by
Um,
them last time, but we'll own them next time.
yeah, exactly. And then, while we're talking about being prepared, do the research. And when you are on a phone screen with a recruiter, be prepared. I've had those situations where they're like, "What job is this? What company are you calling from?" And that always starts the conversation off on a not so awesome standpoint. And recruiters are trying to understand, can they do the job? And then it also comes down to, am I willing as a recruiter to put my reputation on the line to present you to my client or to my hiring manager? So sometimes I think job seekers take the recruiter screen a little too lightly and more transactional, where there's a really great opportunity to interview, with excellence in that conversation, so that you are more likely to be fast tracked through the process, and you'll have another champion or advocate within the organization.
Yeah, the recruiting process in dealing with the recruiter is such a challenge for most people because they don't understand, especially on the third party recruiting side, the
Mhm.
outsourced recruiting side, not the
Right.
in-house. Recruiters don't find jobs for people, they
Hmm.
find people for jobs,
Hmm.
right? You're on the wrong side of the value proposition as an
Right.
employee. And you need to understand that it's more than just a foundational fundamental checklist thing that you're talking to the recruiter. They're the
Hmm.
ones that really decide whether or not you're moving to the next step.
Hmm.
And the other thing that I really want to make sure that we stress is, as a job seeker, especially in a semi candidate controlled market that we're in
Hmm.
right now,
Right.
you're interviewing the company as much and should be more than they are interviewing you,
Oh,
right?
100%.
You
Yeah.
need to you need to take the ownership and the onus of, I want to make sure this is a fit for me, not
Hmm.
just am I a fit for you. We get
Hmm.
so scarcity minded. You start talking about kind of the financial strife that some of us
Right.
face. Um, there's other jobs, people. There's always other
Hmm.
jobs. Make
Yeah.
sure it's the right one for you, or at least as close to the right one as possible.
Absolutely. And it's, it's tricky right now where some of the interviews are few and far between. Like I spoke with another talent professional that I met in Nashville about a month ago. And, she was like, I'm just getting so defeated that I've only had like one interview in the last month and I'm doing part-time contract work. And, kudos to her for doing some work, while she's keeping her skills relevant and continuing to, apply and network in service of that next full-time position. But mindset is absolutely critical in this process too. And so many people are experiencing a unexpected job transition, and I realize now that I've been coaching for a couple years how much people attach their identity to their profession. And when this decision is made for them, there is just a level of humility, and there's definitely stages of grief that people go through, and kind of untangling this narrative of who they are as a small company CEO or a CPA. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, if what you do is who you are, you're doing something either ridiculously spot on and right, so that
Hmm.
counts for about 1.5% of the population,
Hmm.
or you're doing it wrong, and
Hmm.
that's the majority of us.
Yeah.
You are not your job, and your job
Hmm.
is not you. So yeah,
Exactly.
find other ways to identify, and I couldn't agree with you more. We're so tied to what we do
Hmm.
as a representation of who we are, and that's
Yeah,
just like one small piece of who you are. Please keep that
exactly.
in mind.
I feel like one of the silver linings from the pandemic was the evolution and kind of shining a light on the employee as more than just an associate or an employee, but we became more human. We became seen as parents, as sisters, as children, and that I think, has changed some of the mental health initiatives within organizations. I know it's definitely changed candidates' priorities of what they're looking for when they are evaluating employers in regards to mental health support or flexibility. I know it's tough out there right now where a lot of positions are hybrid or back in the office, and the remote positions keep, being minimized. But I predict in the next 6 to 9 months that more true hybrid roles and more remote positions will open back up. But I think this quarter is going to be a little quirky. So one of my friends was saying like she wasn't expecting things to pick up until the beginning of first quarter.
That's interesting. And what's fascinating to me is it's documented that we didn't really lose a step moving people back from in office to remote, right?
Mhm.
But what we are seeing is that companies are losing people that they're calling back in, right? The
Oh,
great resignation, quiet quitting, call it whatever you like.
right.
Part of it's
There, oh
because
wait, the last thing I heard was, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, was it was a term about employees that are staying on but are crazy resentful. If somebody knows the word, I've only seen it like once or twice, but they are like dealing with a toxic boss, unhealthy, had to come back in the office, very disengaged, underperforming, and just dissatisfied. But the market being what it is, there's also hesitancy, and I'm seeing this with some hard to fill engineer roles, that it's very difficult to get people to make a move because they're afraid first in, first out. So they want to kind of see what happens over the next 6 months. It's really interesting.
and that makes sense. I mean, listen, we've been teetering on the brink of recession for over 3 years now. At some
Hmm.
point, we're bound to actually dip into it for real as opposed to this faux recession that we're all worried about. And by the way, go to Target at 2 p.m. on any given Wednesday. I assure you, we're not in a recession, people. That's not a thing. Um,
Right. Yeah.
but everybody's. It's like you can't play poker with scared money. You
No.
don't win when you got scared money, and that's where, like, society as a whole, that's where we are right now. And so
Mhm.
I get the idea that last in, first out is a
Mhm.
thing. Um, but that doesn't change the fact that if you look at the number of open jobs versus the number of available candidates,
Mhm.
you know the numbers better than I do. I just know
Mhm.
that there's more of these than there are of these.
Yeah. And it's hard, and for me, like with the people I network with on LinkedIn is heavy job seekers, right? So sometimes I feel like I'm consuming the gloom and doom, and I just like at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I need to see some good news. So anytime I see, I've taken the green banner down, I've landed a new opportunity, lots of celebration there. So I was curious, and you and I kind of share the same theory around being. Well, someone told me I was a little too feral for corporate America uh, when I went to this retreat in Costa Rica. It was actually from a shaman, and that was part of the tipping point that was leading me out of corporate. She said, "You're like a feral cat, Anna." I was like, "Great." But if you had to get a job in the next 6 months and you were going to start networking with recruiters, what would be your approach with all of your years of savvy networking and relationship building? Is there anything that comes to you that how you would engineer your process?
Yeah, for sure. So I would start with, what am I focused on, right?
Mhm.
What is the role or roles that I want?
Okay.
Then I would find people that recruit and niche in that specific industry or those types of roles. I
Perfect.
would start talking to them, right? Whether it's a LinkedIn message or a connection request or whatever the conversation may be. I might actually go old school and pick up the phone. I know I'm crazy like
That
that.
is so crazy.
I know I'm out there and I love every minute of it. Because it turns out recruiters are ridiculously busy people that are not the most, a lot of them aren't overly organized. So they're running all over and trying to spin a bunch of plates at once. And
Yes.
the people that get called back are the ones that call the most, right? Squeaky wheel gets
It's
greased.
yes, yes.
And so I would stay top of mind with them. And then I would also ask them, who else should I be talking to? Who else does what you do?
Yeah.
Right? I grew up as a recruiter. That was my
Ah,
early career. And so,
I knew you were one of us.
if you end a phone call as a recruiter without getting someone to call, you failed, right? You
Oh,
know this. And the same thing as a
coffee's for
job seeker.
closers. We're dialing for dollars over here.
That's it. We got to keep the phone calls going.
Hmm.
And so as a job seeker, so do you.
Yeah.
So do you. Otherwise, there's no forward momentum. There's no progress, right? Again, there's people know people, people talk. So
Hmm.
I'd find out who those folks are. I would leverage the heck out of LinkedIn. I've been telling
Hmm.
people about LinkedIn jobs for, I don't know, 16 years. I think I did my first LinkedIn training in 2005. So 18 years.
Wow.
My LinkedIn training experience is old enough to serve in our military. What do you think of that, people? Um, but
I
it's
think
it
that means you're extremely wise. To your point, one of the common trends I see with job seekers is they are afraid of being too much and they don't want to be a pest. And they forget that recruiters are running anywhere from 10 to 30 plus positions. And I typically was doing 6 to 12 phone screens a day. So if you're following up with me, I would always recommend that you reference the day that you talked, the position title that you discussed, and any of the key takeaways or next steps that were framed in that conversation when you're following up. So it grounds that recruiter in, how do I know this person? Why do I know this person? Did I present this person? To your point, we're spinning a lot of different plates, and keeping your name at the top of their call list, at the top of their inbox, at the top of their DMs, in LinkedIn. And don't be afraid to use innovative ways to show interest or gratitude, like voice notes or short videos. I want to just warn or heed anyone who's following up with recruiters, less characters is best. So say as much as you can in as short amount of characters as you can, and you will likely get a better result, because consuming a whole, novel is not going to stop the scroll for me. It's going to, cause me to move on to something else. So,
right. It's going to be, I'm going to get back to that. Right. I'm going to do that later. And if you look at your calendar right now, you show me where later is, right? That shit doesn't exist. So for me, I tell people all the time, when you're at a networking event, do yourself a favor and have some seriously obscure conversation. Like, just talk about the most random or ridiculous
people
stuff.
are going to remember you.
So when you follow up, hey, we had a conversation about pink elephants wearing purple bow ties. Do you remember that? Yeah, I remember that, you nut job. How are you? Yeah, of course you remember that. So your point is well taken. You got to stand out. And the other thing you said that I want to put a nail in is, don't be afraid to call, email, LinkedIn, text, Facebook, right? At the same damn time. Show up in these multiple places. That doesn't mean that you've got to do that 18 times a day.
Right.
But multiple touch points, even though most of those things all come to this same device, we all are creatures of habit.
Right.
You check the same thing first, and then the next thing, and then the next thing every time. And so you might get that message on LinkedIn 3 hours before you see it in an email, right? You might get it as an email the day before you get it as a voicemail, depending on how you are. So touch people appropriately, of course, but in multiple places at once, because why not?
Exactly. And I think I would use the term social job searching to describe exactly what you're talking about. You are, showing up socially and digitally and in a variety of different ways, being visible in different spaces and places. And you know how it is when you're connected with someone on LinkedIn and then you see they follow you on Instagram and then they migrate over. Like Brian Schulman just friended me on Facebook, and because we've been connected and I've been on his live show here, several times, I'm like, oh, well, now we can connect, But if you're a job seeker and I do one phone screen with you and you try to connect with me on Facebook, that's a little weird. So it's a delicate balance. So
know where you are, right? For
yes,
sure.
exactly.
Because people use the different platforms for different reasons. And you can even ask, hey, what's your preferred method of communication?
That is a beautiful way to wrap up a phone screen with a recruiter, is to reflect back what you understand next steps. Terry, I understood you were going to present my, resume to this person. I should hear back in the next 2 to 5 business days. And if I don't hear from you, how would you like me to follow up? Text, email, smoke signal, pigeons, what is it? Let us know.
I looked at you funny because on my old contact page, right, which is gone now, but it did. It said, you can call, you can text, you can use the bat signal, you can send smoke signals, you can hit me with a carrier pigeon. I don't care. Just get at me, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And we kind of have to do that. It's just the way the world is right now. And for God's sake, people, the key to success in any networking, job search, sales gig, whatever, is following up.
Yes,
right?
100%.
For the love
And
of
I
Pete,
can give
don't they?
another example to that. Corporate. I had presented a young lady for like a coordinator or associate buyer role. The team had passed on her originally. She ended up following up with me like 3 weeks in a row on the same day, roughly around the same time. And by the third time, it was, Thursday afternoon, and I knew she was going to message me on Friday at like 10 o'clock. It like trained my brain to make sure that I followed up with the merchandising hiring managers to say, hey, did you get a chance to look at this candidate? Because I know I need to have an answer for her. So that, to your point, 100% works. And I did get a result for her. She did get an interview, and it was a successful placement after that. But had she not stayed on me, I might have just focused on new candidates, and
The
I
other
don't ever
squeaky
like.
wheels.
Right. I don't want to start over. If I've interviewed you and I've already presented you, but I'm herding cats with the hiring managers who are on vacation, they're, living life on life's terms. That is also a big part of why that follow up is so absolutely critical. And recruiters are human too. Their kids get sick, their cars break down, they get laid off. Like half of all the TA people in the United States in the last year. So
For sure. For sure, for sure. And so it's a wild thing right now, right? It everybody's doing the best they have where
mhm.
they are with what they've got,
Yes,
right? And so
exactly.
for you as a job seeker to forget that the recruiter is a person,
Mhm.
right? We have to humanize every aspect
The
of this,
whole process.
right? So, build a relationship with a
Mhm.
recruiter, and they'll go out of their way to help you in any way they can. Because ultimately, while there's a percentage of them that are in it strictly for the dough, the
Right.
majority of recruiters actually care about people. That's how they got into it, because there's
Exactly.
nothing more gratifying than helping somebody go from here to here in a new job.
Exactly. And it's one of the biggest, like, we talk about just the job search and, this career changes. It is a life decision. It is just as important as moving in with someone, getting engaged, deciding to have a baby, like moving across the world. It is a life decision. It affects your relationships, your kids, your schedule. I was sitting at swim tryouts with my daughter the other night, and I was talking to this lovely woman, and she was asking me how often my daughter swims, and she swims 5 nights a week, 5:45, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So that's a lot of driving for my husband and I. And she looked at me and she said, well, how do you do that? Is your employer flexible? And, luckily, I'm in a position that I have flexibility as an entrepreneur, but it gave me pause to think about, these decisions factor in when this woman may be looking for another job. She's going to be evaluating, is there flexibility? Can I leave early to get my son to practice before he starts driving? So it is, something for me that I have always felt just gratitude and immense privilege to do this work, to serve and match job seekers up with opportunities. And then now also being able to coach job seekers through this process, because I feel the magnitude of, these experiences and choices.
I hope that one of the key takeaways from COVID, and you alluded to this about 20 minutes ago a little bit, is that employers start to realize, or at least remember, that eyeballs on a people doesn't make them any more productive. What
Right.
really matters is the results they generate,
Hmm.
where they do it, when they do it, to some extent, even how they do it
Right.
shouldn't matter a lick. Did they
Hmm.
do it? Was it done right? And did they get it done before it needed to be done? Those
Yeah.
are the things that matter. Results matter,
Results.
right?
And I just think there is we need more people educating, middle managers to higher level decision makers within organizations to adopt that mindset and approach with today's modern employee, because we're still holding on to this almost way of working that came out of the Industrial Revolution, right? And it's going to take a long time to unwire that whole process, especially when you have a very diverse, group of, boomers to Gen Z and younger that are doing today's work. So
100%.
go ahead.
No, I'm just nodding and saying 100%. Period.
So I wanted to pause. There were a couple questions and wanted to get your thought on this. Heather said, what is the reason for companies enrolling more employees in the first quarter as opposed to other times? Do you want to go first? And then I have a thought about this time before the first quarter about why now is a good time to look for a job.
So, and I have a feeling your answer, my answer is going to be the same. At the beginning of the year, everybody knows exactly what their budget is, right? And so they set the budget the year before. They know exactly what it looks like. So it's real easy to hire at the beginning of the year. And I think, and I don't want to step on your toes, and I'm willing to be wrong here, but at the tail end of the year, they might have a use it or lose it thing, which is why they end up hiring in the fourth quarter, right? Everybody's like, oh, December is a lousy time to get a job. Not always true.
No, I for years, and this proved true last year, November and December were some of my highest direct hire placements. And here's why. The summer slowdown has ended, and it is the use it or lose it if they're on a fiscal budget. So hiring managers get super motivated to get those positions filled before the end of the year. So what that means is there's less lengthy interviews. It's usually a quicker process. And like last year, I tried to take the last 2 weeks of December off, and I was on a cruise to Hawaii, and I was having to spend half my days. Luckily, the time change worked for me, making offers. I think I made like 12 offers in that week for all positions that I had been working on, October, November, December. They just all were like, got to get it in there. So, but to your point, I also think that, yes, the budget's established. They've gotten through the new year. But now this is where a lot of people take their foot off the gas and they think, I'll just wait till the first of the year to get a new job. I encourage you to keep your foot on the accelerator, network, apply, keep interviewing, because, and this is where that follow-up is going to be critical when timing matters and you're top of mind. Then I'm going to be like, oh, Terry Bean's great for that job. Let me get him in, fast track him, hired, done. So don't take your foot off the gas. You could be, pleasantly surprised by how quickly things could happen the rest of this month up until the first 2 weeks of December. I mean, I was like pushing it at like December 20th last year.
It's absolutely true. I've had as a past recruiter, December usually ended up being one of my best months of the year. It was crazy.
Exactly. And that's how it was. Like my billings in agency lifetime, I was shocked the number of positions that I would close in November and December. It was wild. So definitely encourage people to keep following up. And I can't see who this is, but they said this was very insightful. And then going back to our conversation about being in the office and belonging, psychological safety and belonging, when the trust isn't there, you have significant business impacts. And it's such a shame because you just cringe, right? When you see these leaders just tripping over their own feet when they just can't get out of their own way. And when I transitioned from agency to corporate recruiting, it was an adjustment because I was a saleswoman. I was pounding the pavement. I was delivering donuts. I was taking people to lunch. And then all of a sudden I was in the office 5 days a week. And instead of being out on the streets, I was just going to another meeting. I was like, oh, we're going to another meeting. How exciting. So that was an adjustment. And then having been an outside salesperson, you have more flexibility. So you can take calls, you can respond to emails, and that culture shift of going from that to having similar responsibilities, but having to be like tied to my desk was definitely a little suffocating. I remember
It's a
that.
buzzkill for sure.
Yeah.
I made that transition at one point as well.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
the money's nice, right? Because you know what it's going to be every 2 weeks. But
yes.
aside from that,
Yes,
not as
but
much.
not being able to make it to soccer games or, feeling like you're just begging for permission to go to a doctor's appointment, it's just silly. And again, like I think that's a little bit of the silver lining from the pandemic and some of these, big shifts that we've had in the way we work. And I think it's going to continue to move really quick. So staying abreast of what's happening and asking great questions to figure out, will this work with your lifestyle, with your family? And will it be work that you get excited when you put your feet on the floor every morning? That's really important too.
Does it make you want to kick the sheets off the bed? Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Terry, you have such an incredible, like diverse and rich professional background. Like, if there's just one piece of advice that you could give the Career BFF audience today, especially those on the job hunt, what would you like to leave them with today?
Oh man. One Piece. You're hilarious.
I know. It's
You're
always really,
hilarious.
I actually should not have asked that question because that's always really hard for me too. So I apologize. You can give me 5 if you want.
Can
You
I
don't have to
can I
limit it
do
to
it in a
just one.
run-on sentence? No, in all sincerity, couple of things. Number one, keep this straight, right? Keep your mindset positive, keep upbeat. You've made it through every single challenge you've ever faced to date. Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching this. So good on you. Number two, get a support system. Find people that are also looking for jobs, meet with them, talk to them, share leads, right? Share
100%. Yeah.
opportunities. Promote the fact that there are companies that you want to work with, promote their stuff, share their stuff on
Mhm.
LinkedIn. Get
Yes.
really active on their pages.
Mhm.
Be visible. You cannot be non-existent, right? We
And
talk
that's
about
Heather's question. She said, how, squeaky wheel gets the grease, but how much is too much?
um I'm gonna let you answer that because
Until your butt is in the seat, it's not too much.
I
And
would
if
totally do that.
a recruiter is gonna, you know, ignore you or ghost you because you follow up too much, then that's probably a signal of a bigger problem within the organization. And that's, in my humble opinion, the universe doing for you what you couldn't do for yourself, and you probably dodged a bullet.
Twice a week. Get in the habit of twice a
Mhm.
week, right? Every
Absolutely.
4 days is fine. Every
Mhm.
5 days is fine. You
Mhm.
go too much longer than that, you're gone. You're no longer anywhere near top of mind because
Mhm.
it just keeps piling on, right?
Yeah, and all of a sudden, your email is 45 down. And also, don't be afraid to follow up on like weird times. I found myself, I used to do a lot of sourcing late at night, or on Sunday afternoons. I used to look at all the resumes in the ATS, and I would disposition those that weren't qualified, and then I would set up calls for the coming week with those that were qualified for the position. Terry, this has been an incredible pleasure. Thank you so much for your insights. If people want to connect with you or learn more about you, do you want them to visit trybean.com or reach out to you directly? What's your preference?
Trybean.com is great. LinkedIn.com/in/Terry Bean is preferred. right?
Okay.
So you can go either way with that.
Awesome.
In the comment section that's under this video that you're watching, I'm
Okay.
going to drop a blog post that I wrote years ago called 11 Things Job Seekers Need to Know About Networking, or
Amazing.
something like that. So take a look at that. There's some really interesting piece of advice, some that we covered today, some that we didn't touch on at all.
Okay.
So give that a look. And
Yes.
if I can be of help, ask. The one last piece that I would tell you is that once you find the company you want to go after, find your mutual connections that are in that company or know people in that company, and get
Hmm.
yourself some quality introductions. Do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For the rest of the audience, on October 19th is the monthly Ask a Recruiter event, 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, noon Pacific. So if you go to my featured section, you can RSVP, or you can opt in to make sure that I email you the invitation, as LinkedIn's invite system is a little quirky. And I want to make sure everyone gets access to the amazing recruiters that volunteer their time to field questions from job seekers. So thanks again, Terry. Everyone, thank you for tuning in. I hope to be here live more frequently. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. If you need a career BFF like myself in your corner, you can always book a career BFF call right under my headline, and I would love to get to know you all a little bit better. Terry, thank you so much. We'll talk soon.